Hello everyone, welcome to our new episode. Welcome to a new episode of Chercheurs. It's Ileana, and today I have with me Pierre from Chercheurs. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation. So I wanted to talk about air pollution and air quality, in Brussels, because I will be talking with Pierre, but I think most of the information that we will hear will be valid for other European cities or worldwide in general. Maybe we can start with, who is Pierre and what does Chercheurs do?
So I'm Pierre Dornier. Nice to meet you. Thank you for the invitation to this podcast. I'm the director of Les Chercheurs in French. In English, it would be the Air Seekers. And the Air Seekers is the main organization combating air pollution in the Brussels region. We only work in the Brussels region, not in Flanders, not in Wallonia, but only the Brussels region is already a lot of work because, as you might know, it's a region, there are municipalities as well inside, it's quite a complicated system, so a lot of work for us.
Yeah, perfect. So we can maybe start with a very basic question. What is air pollution and what is the distinction between, for instance, the NO2 and particle-based air pollution?
So I think it's important first to remind what pollution in general is, because sometimes people don't really, struggle to define it. Pollution is something that damages the environment and the health. Air pollution is pollution then, but in the air. It's not in the water, it's not plastic, it's in the air. So when you breathe air pollution, you damage your health. When air pollution is around, plants, for example, it damages plants. That's what air pollution is. Now, if we zoom in a little bit further, in big cities in general, there are two types of air pollutants. There is particulate matter. Particulate matter is basically like very, very fine dust or sand. That comes mainly from burning something. So if you burn wood, if you burn diesel or gasoline, then you emit particulate matter. That's one pollutant. And the other one is nitrogen dioxide. This is not like a physical pollutant. This is not dust or sand. This is a gas. And this gas is mainly emitted by road traffic, so cars, vans, trucks, motorbikes. To give you figure, in the Brussels region, half of all the nitrogen dioxide emissions come from road traffic.
Mm-hmm. So it's the road traffic because they burn diesel.
Yeah, they burn fuels, basically. So it's true with diesel, it's true with petrol, and it's true with gas, like natural gas.
Yeah. So does for instance, buildings and the industry also contribute to this pollution? And like in Brussels, I think the most is from road traffic.
So it depends which pollutant you are talking about. If you talk about particulate matter, mm-hmm. It's basically 1/4, if I remember correctly, maybe check that afterwards. 1/4 comes from road traffic, 1/4 comes from heating, 1/4, not quite sure anymore now, the industry, and then the last quarter from other sources. So it's quite spread, the different sources for particulate matter. When it comes to nitrogen dioxide, the main source, the main polluter definitely is road traffic, because 50% of all the nitrogen dioxide in Brussels comes from road traffic. And the other 50% is divided into heating, industry,
mm-hmm.
etc., etc.
I see. So I want to talk about the health impacts and economic impacts. But first of all, do you think there's enough awareness in Brussels region? And if not, why isn't? Because, sometimes I recently made a podcast about AI and data centers, and I think in my head, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the problems is that when something is not very visible, it's a bit more difficult for people to give it an importance. And air pollution, if it's not very severe, that you can clearly see the sky has a different color, it remains a bit invisible. So do you think this is like one of the challenges, or do you think Brussels region citizens are aware of it or reacting to it?
Yeah, it's definitely a very big issue everywhere, in all big cities. I think people are aware that air pollution exists and that big cities are polluted. The problem is that if you ask them, if you ask yourself, if you try to think, what am I breathing right now? What was I breathing an hour ago? What am I going to breathe tomorrow? I have absolutely no clue. I mean, you could maybe get a device and try to monitor a bit, but it's very complicated. And as you say, you can't see it. I mean, unless it's very polluted, there is a smog, then yeah, you might be seeing it, but that's a bit of an extreme. Whereas with water or food, as you say, you can see it. I mean, food, I guess the best is, the most visible, because you even have, you go to the supermarket, you get a packet of biscuits, you'll have the ingredients, you'll have the share of, I don't know, sugar, etc. You'll have the Nutri-Score. You really have a lot of information. Water, a little bit less, and we know now that there are some pollutants that we can't see, the PFAS, thing. But still, it's a little bit easier to track. If the water is brown, you're not going to drink it. You know that, it's not good. With air, first, it's very difficult to see. That's the first issue. And the second issue is that even if you know that the air surrounding you is polluted, you don't have a choice. You have to breathe it. Because, I mean, you might be able to, I do this exercise, and you can do it at home as well. How long can you hold your breath? I do it with kids when we go to schools to raise awareness about air pollution. I think maximum, unless you are an athlete, is going to be 3 minutes. So after 3 minutes, you don't have a choice. You have to breathe. If the air is polluted, you have to damage your health, basically, because of that. So that's a real issue. That weighs, for example, in cities. I've seen that in France. I think in Paris, they give information about the air quality on the advertising big signs. And in Grenoble and Lyon, near the Alps in France, they have this system where they have equipped the top of some buildings with lights. If the air is okay, then the building is lit in green. If the air is bad, then the building turns red. So that's a rather interesting way to, say, okay, today there might be an issue, but then what do you do?
Exactly. Exactly. Stop breathing.
Yeah, not possible.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are long-term solutions. Maybe we can talk about that after. Was that your only question? I can't remember now.
Yes. Maybe now we can talk about the health impacts. So I don't know personally if there are direct impacts to your health. I mean, again, we consider like Brussels, because it's not like in some parts of the world that there's a severe air pollution, for instance, somewhere where people almost every day need to wear masks. So in Brussels, it's not the case, but I'm sure the pollution, because Brussels is quite so polluted. And maybe you can also talk about that in the European scale where Brussels stands. What is the health impact on citizens, on children, but also on the environment? So you mentioned that air pollution also impacts plants, which also, again, goes back to impact our health, because we probably eat that plant or whatsoever. So maybe we can also make this distinction.
Yeah. So first, I think it's important to say that yes, there are cities in the world that are more polluted than Brussels. For example, at the very moment in India, I think it's in New Delhi, air pollution level is 40 times above the WHO recommendation, which is completely crazy. They have to close schools and everything. In Brussels, the situation is better. It doesn't mean that it's good. I think this is very important to remind that. The WHO says that above its guideline, I'm not going to give you the figures because it's a bit technical, but it has a guideline, and it says that above it, there are important risks for human health. In Brussels, everywhere, we are above this guideline. So everywhere, there are important risks for human health. And even if we were under this guideline, there would still be risks, a bit less serious, but still. So very important to start by saying that there is an issue. It's less important than in other cities, but there is an issue and we need to tackle it. The effects on health, they're very broad. So it's going from a mild cough, might cough a little bit 1 day, 2 days, because there is a little bit too much nitrogen dioxide in the air, and it makes your throat itchy, and that's that's it. I mean, inverted comma, that's it. On the other sides of the spectrum, you have very serious illnesses. So you have asthma, for example. We know nowadays there are several studies showing it's asthma for kids, children asthma is very directly linked to NO2, so nitrogen dioxide concentrations. And it's a very serious illness. If you see someone, a kid or an adult suffering from asthma, it's very scary and impressive. There is, I'm not sure the word in English, but like heart attacks, basically. So you can have more, you're more at risk of having a heart attack when you are exposed to air pollution. And there is, and that I think everybody is aware about, that cancer. And important to specify that it's not only lung cancer that is linked to air pollution. We now know that there are other types of cancer that are linked to air pollution. So that's why it's very important to make everything we can to combat air pollution and, as a result, avoid all these illnesses, from the mild cough to the very lethal cancer that you might catch because of air pollution.
Yeah. And how about the environment? How about the environmental impact?
So the issue with the environment is mainly that when there is pollution in the air, this pollution can go in the rain, basically in the clouds, and then it creates acidic rain, and that might basically kill or very seriously damage, and then they die or they're less healthy, and can be a big problem.
Yeah. Is there also like a study, or to our knowledge, that it also impacts the soil, the quality of the soil, and like a future impacts of it?
That I don't know. I don't know. So I wouldn't take position on that. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. So you mentioned that in Brussels region, for instance, the transport was one of the biggest reason of air pollution. And when we start talking about like how we can make it more sustainable, etc., there's a lot of pushback from people because we want to take people's cars and etc., or we want to do this and that, increase costs, or there is not enough public transport, which is true, but that's one of the solutions actually. And people discuss a lot about the economical impact of not only air pollution, but in every single aspect of climate adaptation or overcoming the impact of climate change. But then we know that in almost all cycle of life, there is a cost actually when we pollute, or the climate change already has a huge economic impact on us basically. So is that also the same, or maybe like, are there any examples that air pollution also contributes to, for instance, public spending through health and etc.? Do we know this kind of numbers? Do we have any proofs on that?
Yeah. First, I think it's important to stress the fact that it's not a very big pushback, because actually more than half of the Brussels population doesn't have a car. It's 56% of all the households don't have a car. So the pushback is definitely either from people living outside of Brussels, and then who are they to give lessons to people living in Brussels and breathing the air pollution on a daily basis, or the people from the minority owning a car. But even inside this minority, we know that a majority of people are supporting clean air measures, and we can talk about the different measures later. So I think it's just very important to say that there is a pushback. It's very visible because these people very often are quite aggressive physically, or in the words they use, especially on social media, for example. But they're not representative of the majority. Just wanted to specify that. Regarding the cost, there is a very big cost. The study that we have that is the most precise is now a little bit old because it's from 2018. But there is no big reason why it would have changed a lot. In 2018, air pollution coming from road transport, so only this one, cost to the Brussels region 1.2 billion euro. So it is very big. I think, if I remember correctly, because I don't have a calculator here, and check maybe after, but it represents 1,400 euros per Brussels citizen, because there are 1.2 million citizens in Brussels, I think. So it's a lot of money. That's for sure. And this money could be used for other things. It could be used for health. I mean, without combating air pollution damages, it could be used for public transport. It could be used for education. It could be, many things could be paid with this money. So I think you're right to stress the fact that it is a health issue, it is an environmental issue, and it is an economical/financial issue. That's at least 3 very good reasons why we should accelerate and improve the fight against air pollution in big cities in general, in Brussels here, because we're living here.
Yeah. So it would be ideal that we only focus on the environmental and health issues and put the economic issues in the second part, but it's not the world we live in, and I think it's really important to go with this kind of evidence that, okay, we talk about how expensive it is to combat air pollution, water pollution, etc., but then there is whole another cost, and I believe that it will increase by the time goes, because if you don't deal with these issues now, it will just only increase. It will not disappear by itself. And talking about the disappearance of the problem, so what can we do? And as I don't mean citizens, because I'm not sure if we can do something at individual level except enough breathing, or maybe just moving out of the city, which is not the solution. So what can we do as citizens to encourage the politicians to act more, and what can politicians do to combat this issue?
Maybe just, if you don't mind, I go back to the point before, because I was thinking of something else. I think it's important as well to say that the most, the poorest people basically are the most impacted and pay the highest cost of air pollution, because if you are rich, to put it simply, as you say, you can just leave the city, you can live in the countryside, but also you have access to better food, you have access to sport. We've just said it, you have access to holidays outside of the city. And because of these different ways of life, you are already better protected against air pollution. So even if you are exposed at the same level as someone who is poorest to air pollution, you will be better protected. So just very important to say that poorest people pay the highest price of air pollution. So it's a double injustice. What can we do? So because air pollution comes mainly in general from road traffic, it's actually quite simple. We have to reduce pollution coming from road traffic and as a result reduce road traffic. So there are different ways to do that. One, and the most efficient, is what we call the low emission zone. There is one in Brussels, there is one in London, there is one in Paris. In big cities now there is one. Basically the way it works is only recent and, as a result, rather clean vehicles can drive inside the city. The old vehicles, quite polluting, they're not allowed anymore to drive in the city. This is very efficient to improve air quality. The low emission zone in Brussels has been implemented in 2018, and since then, so today in 2024, nitrogen dioxide concentrations have decreased by 30%. Might not sound very big, but it's very, very important decrease. So it works well. The issue is that it's socially not very just, because if you are living in Brussels, you don't earn a lot of money, you need a car, and you can't afford a new car because you have to change because of the low emission zone, then what do? So we are, with the air seekers, we are fighting to keep the low emission zone, but to make it more social by helping financially people who need, and I insist, only people who need a car and who can't afford a new one. So the low emission zone, there is also what we call in English, the low traffic neighborhoods. There are quite a few in London. For example, there is one that has just been created in the center of Paris. And there is also one in Brussels. If you know Brussels, it's what we call the Pentagon, so the very center where Grand Place is. The concept is, or the idea, is that you can't cross with a car a low traffic neighborhood. You have to go around it, or you have to stop inside it, but you can't just cross it and pollute it without bringing something to it, like spending your money in a shopping center, for example. And this way, because you have to go round it, it makes your trip a little bit longer, and so it incentivizes you to use instead public transport or your bike, or to even just walk there. This system exists in Barcelona and Ghent, for example, and it works really well because, again, people realize that, oh yeah, okay, it's going to take me 10 minutes extra with my car. It's round the corner. I will just, take the bus or the metro. It will just cross this zone, and I will be faster. So it makes public transport and active mobility more competitive. This is another one. So low emission zone, low traffic neighborhoods. Another one that we work on quite a lot as well is what we call school streets. A school street is a street that passes by a school and that is closed to road traffic. By doing that, you protect kids in the school from air pollution. Again, we have figures, and we know that where school streets have been created in London and Paris, again, because these cities are quite proactive on these measures, there is decrease in NO2 of between 25 and 30%, which is, again, quite a lot. These are the three measures we work the most on: low emission zone, low traffic zone, school streets. There are others. Another source of pollution in cities is urban deliveries. If you buy something on a big online platform, most of the time it's a diesel van that brings it to you. In Brussels, 95% of the vans are diesel. And when they drive to your house, bring the parcel, maybe it's not the right size of shoes, you send it back, the van comes again and goes again, and it's a lot of trips. This pollutes as well. So a way here is to either have your parcels delivered in what we call collection points in the supermarket round the corner, for example, where you live. That's the best. Or for a cargo bike to bring it to you. So a cargo bike is a bike with a platform at the front of the bike. Or to have an electric van. If it's like, I don't know, you order a sofa, for example, it might be complicated to put it on a cargo bike. So then it's a van, but it's an electric van instead of a diesel van. So yeah, a lot of ways to tackle air pollution. But as you said at the beginning, in general, globally, it means reduce the numbers of cars, trucks, vans, etc. And as a result, reduce the space for these vehicles and increase the space for public transport and active mobility, walking, cycling. And when you do that, or when you try to do that, there are people who are going to say, no, you can't take the space away from me because I want to be able to park my car right in front of my door. And that's the big fights.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's we don't have a solution for that yet, no.
Well, the solution is, to explain, to take time to, there are some, I don't know how the listeners are familiar with Brussels, but for example, one of the municipalities, so one of the borough, is called Saint-Gilles, and in Saint-Gilles, 70% of the households don't have a car. So only 30%, which is a big minority, of households have a car. Yet, in this municipality, it's still complicated to get rid of car parking spaces because the minority is quite vocal and doesn't want the politicians to get rid of car parking spaces. So in this case, you have to basically mobilize the majority and explain that it's in the interests of this majority to get rid of car parking spaces and to replace them with trees. Trees help a lot to, when during the summer there are heat waves. If there are trees, the heat waves are a bit less strong. You can replace car parking spaces with racks for bikes. You can replace them with games for space for kids to run or to play. There's many things that you can do with more space in cities. We are lacking space, public space in cities. So.
Yeah, that's true. So you said, you highlighted the point to have a car if you need. So what is the need? I mean, how do we define it? Because then it will be, as I mentioned you before we started recording, when I was a candidate in Atterbeck and talking to people like here and there on the street, most of them were kind of unhappy with the good move, for instance. Which, in Atterbeck, I don't know how they were very unhappy with it, but whatever. And that was one of the points, because there was, for instance, a guy that I was talking, and he was saying that he leaves his job at 11 p.m. And then if he needs to wait for the metro because the metro is less in the evening and etc. So if he takes his car and blah, blah, blah. So how do we define needing a car? And I understand when people say that, because we are in a society that we need to be somewhere very fast. Time is very precious, and we don't want to spend it going to a very crowded metro. I mean, I'm talking from their perspective, because that's what I heard. So how can we actually fight with this? I'm sure they will be, because I don't think people are like, oh, there's air quality, I don't care, I don't give a damn about it, and I have kids, so I'm fine with it, whatever. I don't think that's the case. I think they would care, because as you said, you're breathing it. It's not that you can buy like a bio food and then you're fine. You cannot just buy bio air that you breathe, like other people, and you don't have the choice to leave the city because that's where you work, and you're economically disadvantaged, etc. So how can we make it, as you said, more like socially inclusive? Because it's a fact, and it's really annoying, but that's the reality, unfortunately.
Yeah. So on your first question, who needs a car? A need is when you don't have a choice. So I think it's as simple as that. And of course, if we start at some point trying to define who really needs a car, there will be a blurry zone, around this definition. But basically, if you don't have another choice than using your own, I'm insisting on that as well, your own car, because and I didn't mention it, but there is a system that is called car sharing. So basically, many places in the city, there are cars that are parked, and these cars can be used by anyone. It's a bit like a rental system, but very cheap. So if you have to use your own car, for example, to go to work, because, I don't know, you start work at 3 a.m., I have no idea, and you have to go quite far away because that's the only place where you can work, and you can't rent a car because I don't know why, then okay, yeah, in this very case, the region should help you to renew your car if you need, so that you can keep driving inside the low emission zone. But there are a lot of ways to avoid this situation. So the people who really need a car, who really need to own a car, the number of these people is actually very, very small. And how to make sure that there is no social injustice around that? Yeah, I think it's important to, so first help these people with information. Oh, but are you aware that there is this solution or there is that solution? Because to be fair, like the car sharing solution is not very well known. It's not necessarily very attractive because you need to pay a subscription. You never really know what you're going to pay after you rent the car. Maybe if you have kids, there is no kid seats in the car. So definitely take time to explain all the solutions that exist to these people. Could be as well, you could take public transport inside the city and then park your car just outside the city and not use your car inside the Brussels region. I mean, it's a bit of a individual approach maybe, but for the people who really need it. And then if there is no existing solution, then we think that the region should finance cars that are accepted inside the low emission zone. And a way to do that is what we call social leasing. So it's a leasing system. It means that you kind of rent a car. Yeah, kind of rent the car, but at a very attractive price because you prove that you don't earn a lot of money. And at the end of, I don't know, after 3 years, for example, just to give a figure, either you buy the car or you give it back because you don't need it anymore. You take another one. This system has been put in place in France, for example. It has been extremely successful. So we think that this is something that should be explored in Brussels as well. But you are absolutely right to insist on the fact that combating air pollution shouldn't come at a social expense. It's very important to make sure that the most economically vulnerable people shouldn't be excluded from the society because they can't buy an electric car, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's true. Also another, maybe it's, well, not irrelevant, but maybe not the topic that you're exactly working on. So in our society, we consume a lot. And sometimes people also react to the fact that they need to sometimes give up on certain comforts or certain luxury because it is needed for the whole society. For instance, when we mention a need to a car, so like no other option, and then you have a car, but then people are like, yeah, but I enjoy it, or maybe on the weekend I want to just decide to go somewhere and take my car and etc., etc. So it's like a luxury also. It gives a lot of comfort, and I don't own a car, but I'm just talking on behalf of what I heard before because I had this discussion with many people. And I don't know how we can actually convince people or raise awareness, because it's not only about air pollution, but on textiles, on, as you mentioned, for instance, when ordering online, it's a huge market, and there's like, even I myself, I try to reduce it, but when also looking from that point, it's also cheaper than going to a shop, like a small shop, to buy the same product, for instance. And people are used to consume and consume and consume. How can we slowly maybe change this? Or are you working together with, for instance, other NGOs or other organizations to fight with this over consumerism?
Yeah. But is it really that comfortable to own a car? I'm not quite sure about that, because you spend so much time in traffic jams. You spend so much time looking for a car parking space on your streets. You spend a lot of money, the insurance, changing the tires because winter is coming, fixing the, I don't know what, because someone, had an accident with you, or because something is not working anymore in the car. I'm really not sure it's that comfortable compared to all the alternatives that exist in a big city, modern city like Brussels, where it's so easy to take public transport. It's very easy to ride your bike. And sometimes I hear, but in Brussels it rains. I ride my bike all the time. It's true that it can be a bit, today it's very windy, for example, can be a bit cold, but it's actually very rare that I am wet because of the rain, or it's going to be a few drops and that's it. So I think there is a big gap between what people think, even if they know it, because they are the ones wasting hours in traffic jams. So between what people think and between the reality. So I think it's just important to remind that. Of course, we need to consume less. That's the starting point. Actually, quite often I hear, people need to replace their car from an old one to a new one because of the low emission zone. Do you really need to replace your car? I'm not sure. Maybe you just, forget about owning a car. And I think it's not, I think that's what's happening, because the percentage of households not owning any car is increasing year after year. So more and more people had a car and don't, they just stop using it. They just sell it. But what's very interesting with the question is transport is linked to a lot of different sectors. We were talking before about urban deliveries. This is directly linked to consumption. Today is the 27th of November. It's a Wednesday. On Friday, the 29th, is going to be Black Friday. Black Friday equals a massive increase of purchases and online purchases. And it's linked a massive increase of vans driving around streets and creating air pollution and noise and traffic jams and dangers for cyclists and pedestrians. We have to stop this madness. I mean, this is obvious, because it's plastic, but also because it drives road traffic that doesn't work with the future of the planet and our own future. So yes, we are this is a message that we hammer again and again, and we definitely, when it makes sense, partner with other organizations working on environmental or social issues, because Black Friday is also a big social issue, because, to name it, Amazon employees are working in very bad conditions. This is not a secret to anyone anymore. So yeah, it is, like with many topics, linked to many other issues. Now, we are a small organization. It's a small team. So we try to focus only as much as possible on the most powerful measures. But yeah, we also at least keep our ears open to other topics and when it makes sense, partner or collaborate with other organizations.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily about your organization, but in general. Sometimes we miss the linkages. For instance, we mentioned like the food system, also like the soil or the plant is also impacted by air pollution. So it's all like a whole cycle that sometimes when we don't match the dots, they got a bit like not interpreted. And maybe a last question would be, I had a question in mind, but I'm trying to put it into words. Okay, so since the weather can move the air from here and there, so how exactly? So yes, we need to work on cities or on regions and etc., but it's also like a whole global issue. If, for instance, Brussels is doing fine, but then I don't know, in Belgium, I saw Antwerp in one of those studies lists. So apparently Antwerp is also not very clean, and Antwerp is not doing very well. Does Antwerp has an impact on its like nearby cities because it's the air. I don't know if it makes sense. In my head, it makes a lot of sense, but it might sound a bit silly. So I was wondering if, for instance, Brussels has a bad impact on the nearby cities. And while asking this, I also know that there's a lot of people living out in the outside cities traveling to Brussels for work. So it's like a give and take kind of a relationship.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Air pollution travels, especially particulate matters. For nitrogen dioxide, it's rather local pollution. It doesn't go very far away. So if you look at a map, like a heat map of nitrogen dioxide, you will very easily see that it's red around big streets and it's, for example, green in parks. It's very much linked to road traffic. Okay. But particulate matter, I say it again, it's a bit like dust or like sand, very, very small, fine. This travels or can travel quite far. So, for example, now and again, we have sands coming from North Africa all the way, like it can be on your windows or, so it's a bit the same thing. If there is wind, you could have air pollution from, I don't know, maybe Antwerp. I don't know the direction of the wind, but let's say Antwerp coming to Brussels or vice versa. Mm-hmm. Or something that we see quite often is, I think it's in spring when farmers spread fertilizer on their fields. Quite often, first you can smell it in Brussels, and you also have particulate matters increase because it's somehow linked. I can't remember exactly why, but it's somehow linked. I think it's ammoniac. So of course the solution is local, but it's also regional, national, European. And that's why it's very important to have local measures. That's the measures we work on because we are a local organization, as I explained at the beginning, but also national/federal and European measures, legislation, laws, regulations. We don't work on these, we don't work at this level, but we partner with organizations working at this level. To give you an example, in Belgium, a lot of companies give company cars to their employees. So a company car is basically a free car. You can drive as much as you want. You can have as much fuel as you want. So it's a big incentive to pollute, basically, to put it simply. But this is federal competency, so we don't work on it. But every time an organization at federal level tackles it, we support it because you can't fix the issue at Brussels level if you don't fix the company cars issue at federal level. And then when the EU works on the air quality directive, for example, so saying air quality limits should be closer to the WHO recommendations, we also back it with our little means. I mean, we're very small, but we also support it and talk about it. And because if the EU says by 2030, our limits will be closer to the WHO guidelines and countries like Belgium will have to respect them, that's good for air quality in Europe, but also in Brussels. Mm-hmm. If the EU says by 2035, no one will be allowed to sell diesel, petrol and gas cars anymore, this is good at EU level, but this is also good at Brussels level, because there will be less of these cars. Just to maybe give a conclusion on this point. The other way is also true. For example, if Brussels has, and London and Paris, big cities, big European capitals, have ambitious low emission zones, this will also have an impact at federal and European level, because as a tourist, you might think, okay, I'll drive to Rome. I don't know. And then you find out that Rome has, which is not the case, but let's dream, that Rome has a strict low emission zone and that you can't enter this zone with your diesel car. Well, then maybe you'll take the train, or please take the train and not the plane. So these rather local measures can also have an impact at national or European level.
No, absolutely. I mean, I really believe in leading by example. And I mean, London, Paris, and these are very big cities and very crowded and also polluted. And Brussels is rather small. Maybe it's not in everyone's sight, but leading by example is really important. And recently I was reading, I'm not sure if it will happen or not, but in Istanbul, for instance, I saw some news about school streets, and it was like, wow, that's very good.
Yeah,
because it's really important. I mean, also for safety of children, but also for environmental aspects. So it's not necessarily that. It's really important to have these legislations, etc., and hopefully they will be implemented, because you've worked before on these topics, and I'm also working, and we know that implementation sometimes is hard. So these little initiatives, I think they are very, very important. And maybe to conclude, since we are talking about Brussels, how do you see actually Brussels region doing on this aspect? Do you think we are on track? Do you think we are a bit far from what we have to do, or we are doing amazing? I don't think so, but maybe.
So it depends. If we're talking about the low emission zone, until now, the region was doing great. I say until now because there was recently kind of a law that was passed to weaken the low emission zone. So this is the first red flag in our opinion. But if the current calendar is maintained, then it's definitely one of the most ambitious low emission zone in the world. So that's good. Hopefully it will be maintained, and we'll fight for it to be maintained. If you look at school streets, Brussels, so here I'm talking about the 19 municipalities because it's a municipal competency. If you look at school streets, Brussels is doing very badly to compare with comparable cities like London and Paris. In London, I think there are 500 or 600, can't remember, school streets. In Paris, I think now it's 200, and within these 200 school streets, I think it's at least 100 streets that are fully pedestrian. So no cars, driving through these streets anymore. And on top of that, there are plants have been planted in the streets. So it's not grey and concretey anymore, as it was before. I really invite you to go check that up at like Rue Scolaire in Paris, or maybe even in English, school streets in Paris I dream that one day we'll have the same in Brussels. And so basically in Brussels, so let's say 500 in London, 200 in Paris. In Brussels, it's, I have a doubt now, but I think it's between 50 and 60 schools that have a school street. So it's very, very small share of schools that benefit from a school street in Brussels.
School street, we mean like it's closed all day long or all year long, or certain time?
Yeah, it's not even, in Brussels, they're not even closed all the time.
Yes,
they're closed
in the morning and in the
exactly,
afternoon.
like let's say 30 minutes in the morning when kids go to school,
exactly.
Then it's reopened. And then 30 minutes in the afternoon, not even, sometimes it's only in the morning, but sometimes 30 minutes in the afternoon when kids leave the school, and then it's reopened to road traffic.
Yeah.
I think
I think it's more like observed like a safety issue.
Yeah, both. I mean, it's a safety that it brings more safety to kids. Absolutely. Because cars are a real danger, especially the big cars now, are a big danger or represent a big danger for kids who are kids. So they're not very careful. They run, which is completely normal. I mean, they're kids. Thank God they do that. But also it improves air quality. As I said before, we saw a decrease by up to 30% of nitrogen dioxide where school streets were created. It also helps tackling noise pollution. We don't mention it often enough, I think, but road traffic is a very important source of noise and noise is a source of stress. So, and we also know that kids, when they are surrounded by noise, they're less efficient at learning, which is problematic, of course. So, yeah, it's really you only have pros, seriously, to reduce road traffic around schools. I'm not saying that you should forbid cars everywhere. This is not possible and this is not wanted. No one wants that. We don't want that. But definitely reduce the number and the quantity of cars, trucks, vans in cities, and when you need them, because sometimes you need them, for them to be lighter, smaller, and electric.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. Well, how do you think we can, me, myself, listeners, individually do something or act on behalf of maybe increasing school streets, but not necessarily only that, on advocating for air quality and less air pollution?
So if you can avoid using directly, like using your car, or indirectly, like ordering online and receiving your parcel thanks to a diesel van. If you can reduce these things, that's very good, because you will reduce the use of diesel, petrol and gas engines. But this is not enough. I mean, we know that individual change behavior is good, but you need a lot of people basically to do that if you want to have a change. So it's also very important to support the change of legislation, to support new measures, new clean air measures. And to do that, you can join some like demonstrations. For example, we organize at least once a year demonstrations with children and parents to ask for more school streets. More than welcome to join us to do that. You can vote, of course. We were talking about it earlier. The elections in Belgium are now behind us, but there are other ways to vote. There will be other moments to vote. And you can express yourself as well online, on social media, by signing petitions. So all these mass ways of expressing yourself are definitely welcome, because politicians, they care about that. I mean, if a lot of people start saying, I want a school street in front of the school of my kids, they're not going to turn a blind eye to it. They're going to, maybe they won't say yes straight away, but they will notice it and they will think twice before saying no, never, or before not doing anything.
No, of course. So the message is engage.
Definitely. Yeah.
Engage in whatever, basically.
Yeah.
That works. Ooh, okay. I'm checking the time. The time is nice. It's a bit longer than I assumed, but I really enjoyed the conversation. I invite everyone to check Air Seekers. Well, first translated in French and then Google it.
Chercheurs.be.
Exactly. Check their work, and if you're in Belgium, and if not, I'm sure everywhere in the world there are some organizations that are advocating for it, and engaging is, I think, the only way to make the change. Thank you so much, Pierre, for your time, for the discussions, and thank you for listening. Until next time.